Welcome into my AFC East division preview. We're going to start with the Buffalo Bills, who I have as the 6th ranked team in the NFL. I thought they had a really solid draft. They picked right on the tail end of that first round receiver run, so they took the approach of just adding the best offensive weapon with Dalton Kincaid. It was really important for the Bills this offseason to add another gear offensively, and I actually think Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox skill set pairs nicely together. They get O'Cyrus Torrence in the second round, who should be a day one upgrade to Ryan Bates, and then Dorian Williams is a really good linebacker prospect, one of the best block shedders in this class, and he's really good in coverage. So they did a good job in the third round of replacing Tremaine Edmonds. And then I'll also shout out Nick Broker. He was one of my guys in this class. They get him in the 7th round. He doesn't have great size or athletic traits, but he was one of the best guards in this class in terms of hand placement and grip strength. When he gets his hands on a defender, he doesn't let go, and he usually drives them into the ground. The biggest strength of this team is the quarterback, Josh Allen, who's one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the NFL. I do have him 1 point behind Burrow just because of the turnovers. Josh Allen set career highs last season in interceptions and turnover-worthy plays, but he more than offsets that with his ability to extend plays and attack every level of the field. He had 52 big-time throws last season, which was the most in the NFL, and 14 more than Mahomes at number 2. So he needs to tone down the aggressiveness a little bit, but the idea that Josh Allen had a disappointing year in 2022 is way overblown. There aren't many weaknesses on this roster, but I do worry about right tackle. Spencer Brown has really struggled in pass protection. He isn't very light on his feet, so quick and explosive pass rushers give him major issues, and I didn't see much progression from year 1 to year 2. And David Kessenberry is a known quantity at this point. I've watched him his whole career at Tennessee and last year with the Bills. He can be okay as depth, but if he's starting a lot of games for you, you're really holding your breath. And offensive line is a weak link unit. Assuming Torrance is okay as a rookie, I actually feel really good about their first 4 left to right, but when you get into the playoffs especially, teams are a lot better at finding your weakness and exploiting it, and it only takes one player giving up pressure to ruin the entire play. My biggest question is who, if anyone, emerges as the number 1 pass rusher. Ed Oliver got, I think, a reasonable extension, but he's not a true number 1, and that goes for really the whole interior defensive line. Buffalo goes 5 or 6 deep with really quality defensive tackles, but none of them are consistent high-impact pass rushers. You've got Von Miller coming off the ACL tear, and even though a torn ACL isn't going to end your career in the NFL anymore, it still takes time to get back to full strength. And then Greg Rousseau had a really encouraging second year, 51 pressures and 9 sacks. He was able to win off the edge, but also line up inside and take advantage of less athletic guards. So I'm optimistic for Rousseau's progression. His combination of size, length, quickness, and hand usage usually results in a productive player. So this should be a top 15 pass rush at worst. They've invested so much in their defensive front over the years. Even guys that haven't exactly panned out are still solid players, but this has the potential to be a true strength, and you're banking on a quick recovery from Von Miller and Greg Rousseau continuing to improve. My breakout pick for the Bills is second-year corner Kaiir Elam. Definitely a disappointing rookie season for a first-round pick. The expectation was that he would slide in at the cornerback 2 spot and immediately give you 75% of Tre'Davious White, but it didn't go that way. They seemed to have more confidence early on in Christian Benford, who they took in the 6th round, but I thought Elam improved as the season went on. You could make the argument that he won them the wild card game versus Miami, so in year 2, I expect him to be a reliable starter on the outside. Buffalo's most underrated player is left tackle Dion Dawkins. I don't know if there's a player in the NFL who's more consistently above average. He's played over 1,000 snaps each of the last 5 seasons. You know exactly what you're getting from him every game. He isn't a dominant run blocker, but in pass pro, he's about the 10th best left tackle any given season. He moves his feet well for someone of his size. He's got long arms and a really consistent anchor. So in a way, he's the perfect left tackle because his play is so consistent, but you only have to pay him $12 million a year. And then my prove it player is linebacker Terrell Bernard. He was a 3rd round pick last season. I thought his tape at Baylor was good, but at his size, I think he was a little bit overdrafted, but he wasn't able to find much playing time last year, and the Bills took another 3rd round linebacker in Dorian Williams, who I think projects much better to the NFL. So this is the year for Bernard to establish himself as a starter or at least a major contributor. The New York Jets come in as my 8th ranked team, 2nd in the AFC East. I was surprised to see them go with an edge rusher in the 1st round after they took Jermaine Johnson last year, but I'm a huge fan of Will McDonald as a prospect. His ability to bend and turn the corner was second to none in this class. Joe Tippmann, they took about a round earlier than I had him graded, but with Aaron Rodgers, you're only getting him for about 2 years, so you don't want to waste one of those seasons on a bad center, so I definitely get prioritizing that position. Carter Warren's an interesting player. He didn't play at all last season, so I was actually late getting to his tape, but he has the prototypical size and frame for a left tackle, and he was a really good pass protector in 2021. And then they also added guys like Israel Abanikanda and Zach Kuntz, who are swings for the fences, elite athletic traits. Abanikanda is a perfect fit for a wide zone scheme, and Kuntz gives them a lot more athletic upside than they have at the tight end position. The Jets' biggest strength is offensive skill players. Aaron Rodgers is still a top 5 quarterback. Garrett Wilson is the complete package as your number 1 receiver, and then it's just an embarrassment of riches at running back. Breece Hall is my breakout pick. Only had 80 carries in his rookie year, but he was the only running back to average over 4 yards after contact per attempt. He's a dynamic weapon as an outside runner or as a receiver. And I guess you've also got to add the injury caveat to Breece Hall. It might take him a while to get back to full strength, but when he does, I expect him to be a top 5 to 7 running back. And then you've also got Michael Carter, who wasn't as good in his second year, but I do think he gives this running back room a nice floor as someone who can step in and be an above average starter when needed. They took Israel Abanikanda in the 5th, who's the ultimate big play threat. He can press outside on wide zone and cut upfield instantly. When you watch his tape at Pittsburgh, he isn't the most powerful runner, but as a complementary piece to Breece Hall, he gives you a lot of upside for explosive plays. And then they also have Bam Knight as RB4, who I think is good enough to be RB2 for a lot of teams. So what New York has in the backfield and outside with Aaron Rodgers under center, that's going to be a lot to manage for opposing defenses. But the major weakness for this team is offensive tackle. We'll see what happens with Mekhi Becton. If he's fully healthy and good to go, then this isn't much of a weakness at all. But at this point, it's hard to have too high of expectations for his availability. And the backup plan is Dwayne Brown, who's going on year 16, and there have been some signs of regression over the last couple seasons. He wasn't nearly as good of a run blocker last year, but he should be solid. And then you've got Max Mitchell and Carter Warren, who you're hoping can develop into a starting role. I actually liked both of them as prospects. Warren has more of the prototypical size for a left tackle, but Mitchell has the movement skills and hand usage to be a better run blocker in my opinion. It looks like Mitchell's going to be the starter at right tackle, but he's also coming off of an injury, and Carter Warren didn't play at all last season, so they have options, but none of them are a sure thing. The Jets' most underrated player is cornerback DJ Reed. I'm seeing way too many cornerback rankings where he isn't even mentioned. Obviously, Sauce Gardner had one of the best rookie seasons of all time for a corner, so he deservedly got a lot of that attention last year. But DJ Reed was maybe not equally as impressive, but a slight step down from Sauce. He's got the speed to cover vertical routes downfield. He's physical and composed playing the ball. He'll shut down screen passes and underneath routes. He really has a complete skill set, and if he's your number 2, you're doing a lot better than most teams around the league. And then my prove it player is Jermaine Johnson. He didn't play much as a rookie, but he did flash some nice hand usage, really explosive first step, and he's got the length and size to convert that into power. But the Jets drafted another edge in the first round in Will McDonald, who I thought was a better prospect than Jermaine Johnson. They've got Carl Lawson. Michael Clemens, the 4th round pick, actually outplayed Jermaine Johnson last year. And then Bryce Huff is really just a pass rushing specialist, but he led the NFL in pass rush win rate. So it's going to be stiff competition for snaps in this edge rotation, and team-wise, it's a good problem to have, but Jermaine Johnson definitely needs to prove himself this year. Coming in at a very close 3rd, we've got the Miami Dolphins, who are still going to be 10th league-wide and just 0.1 behind the Jets. Really small draft class, only 4 picks. They took South Carolina cornerback Cam Smith in the 2nd round, Devin Achane, one of the fastest running backs ever. Elijah Higgins is kind of a hybrid wide receiver tight end, and then Ryan Hayes, the offensive tackle out of Michigan, I had an undrafted grade on. To start out, I've got to mention the coaching staff, which ranks 3rd in the NFL. Mike McDaniel had an outstanding first year. He did a great job designing an offensive system that took advantage of the strengths of his quarterback and offensive weapons, and he has a really good feel for tempo and pace as a play caller, which most people who come out of the Shanahan tree seem to have. And then you add Vic Fangio, one of the best defensive coordinators in recent NFL history, and you give him a loaded roster to work with. I just think Miami has some of the best synergy in the league between coaching staff and personnel. But the speed that they have offensively is what allows this scheme to work. With Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert, Devin Achane, and Jeff Wilson, this has to be the fastest offensive roster ever assembled. They can stretch the field in every direction in both phases. Some of the route combinations with Waddle and Hill just seem impossible to cover, and Mike McDaniel basically gets to play on sandbox mode and combine this cutting-edge system with game-breaking speed. But like every team in the AFC East, they do have some weak spots on the O-line, and I think they've got 3 out of 5 spots taken care of. Teron Armstead is a shutdown left tackle, Connor Williams had the best season of his career at center, and Robert Hunt has been a really good right guard who's steadily improved every year. But you've got Liam Eichenberg at left guard, he's a liability in pass pro, and Austin Jackson missed most of last season. He's the expected starter at right tackle, and he's been replacement level or worse since he was drafted. So it's the same thing I said with the Bills. If you have 1 or 2 clear weaknesses on the offensive line, it doesn't really matter how good your other players are, because it only takes one person to lose for the quarterback to get pressured. My biggest question for the Dolphins is what we get from their veteran corners. They added Jalen Ramsey this offseason, and he isn't in his prime, but I still think he's a top 10 corner, and he brings a lot more to the table than just man coverage ability. So I feel good about him aging well. I think even when he loses a step, he could make an easy transition to safety or slot. But with Xavier Howard, I'm a little bit more worried. He got beat a lot last year. He ranked in the 100s in most coverage rankings, and there were times he really struggled keeping up with receivers vertically. So I don't want to write someone off after one down year, but with corners and receivers in their 30s, regression happens pretty quickly. I will say Fangio's scheme is better at protecting corners than the cover one heavy system they've run for the last few years. So if it turns out that he is on the downslope, I don't think it'll be as easy to exploit it as a weakness. And they also took Cam Smith in the 2nd round who could fill in if needed. My breakout player is Jalen Phillips, and honestly, I think he broke out last year. He ranked 6th among edge rushers with 77 pressures, and he has so many different ways of winning as a pass rusher. He can threaten blockers in all 3 directions. He has the athletic traits you would expect for someone who's the top-ranked recruit in his class, and last year he showed major improvement with his hand usage and technique, but I think he can hit another level this year and get the league-wide recognition he deserves. The Dolphins' most underrated player is Zach Sealer, former 7th-round pick who's emerged as a top-tier run defender. Last year he had 10 tackles on 3rd or 4th down with less than 3 yards to go, and that was tied for 1st among defensive linemen. And he isn't a technically polished pass rusher, but he has the speed and motor to create pressure when he's given opportunities. And then it was really hard to think of a prove-it player, but I'll go with Raekwon Davis at nose tackle. He was the one player on this defensive front that was underwhelming to me. He'll get moved by double teams, and he doesn't make a lot of plays in the backfield. And having consistent nose tackle play is really important for Fangio's defense. If you're playing with fewer numbers in the box, you need your D-line to win back some of that advantage. And finally, we've got the New England Patriots at 19. They took Christian Gonzalez in the 1st round, and they needed a big outside corner, but that became even more of a need with Jack Jones getting arrested. Keon White was getting some 1st-round buzz, but this was a much more appropriate spot for him to go. And then Marte Mapu is a really exciting player out of Sacramento State, hybrid safety linebacker. I think they're going to play him at linebacker, and the Patriots have had success with similar prospects in the past. And then they had a lot of day 3 picks, but I really liked City So out of Eastern Michigan. He played against a lower level of competition, but I thought he could be a day 1 starter in a gap scheme. And then Demario Douglas, the receiver out of Liberty, is really undersized, but he has the footwork and route running ability to potentially carve out a role for himself. And looking at this team's outlook, there's a lot of pressure on Bill Belichick to win this year. I wouldn't say he's on the hot seat, but the post-Tom Brady grace period has come to an end, and the fate of this team is going to come down to the passing game. I think their biggest weakness is wide receiver. They just gave Devontae Parker an extension. He's a number 2 or number 3 contested catch target. Kendrick Bourne, I think, is extremely underrated, but still not a number 1. And then you've got Juju Smith-Schuster in the slot. These are all starting caliber receivers, but nowhere near enough firepower to keep up with the best offenses in the AFC. The X factor from that group is Tyquan Thornton, 2nd-round pick last year, who didn't do much as a rookie, but he's the only guy they have who at least projects as a vertical threat, but he does need to be more consistent catching the football, and he also struggled with physicality during the route. Corners last year were able to move him off his path and take him out of the play. So this is a team that really needs DeAndre Hopkins to put together a formidable group of receivers. And they do have a really nice pair of tight ends with Hunter Henry as the Y and Mike Gesicki as basically another slot. But the other part of the equation is Mac Jones, who I think has been set up to fail by the lack of weapons, the lack of a real offensive coordinator, and in general, no real vision for how to get the most out of a quarterback on a rookie contract. taking Mac Jones in the first round should have been a win now move. He isn't a developmental prospect who's going to take 5 years to reach this insane upside. The point is that you're getting a starting caliber quarterback who you only have to pay $3 to $4 million a year, and when everyone else is paying their quarterbacks $30 to $40 million, that gives you a huge advantage when it comes to team building and surrounding your quarterback with enough weapons to succeed. But New England basically wasted a year of that surplus value. If you watch Mac Jones last year, especially the second half of the season, he played a lot better than everyone seems to think. He still has the accuracy and touch to distribute the ball effectively. He just isn't someone who's going to elevate a below average supporting cast. So that's my biggest question for the Patriots this year. Are they going to give Mac Jones the system he needs to have success and get them to the playoffs? The biggest strength on this roster is the interior offensive line. David Andrews, Michael Onwenu, and Cole Strange is a great trio, and I'm not sure I agree with the decision to draft 3 more interior players, but I did really like Sidy Sow, and Antonio Mafi has a lot of upside as a run blocker. It's unfortunate we didn't get to see a full year from Christian Barmore, but he's going to be my breakout pick. Former first rounder, when he's been on the field, he's been a force rushing the passer. He has the quickness and explosiveness of an undersized hybrid kind of player, but he has the frame of a prototypical 3 technique, and as long as he's healthy, I expect him to have a big year. And the most underrated player is edge rusher Josh Uche, really just a designated pass rusher at this point, but even in a part-time role, he was one of the most valuable players on this defense. He had 56 pressures and 12 sacks last season on just 285 pass rushing snaps, and it'll be interesting to see how his career progresses and if he can earn more of a full-time role. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy the video, make sure to like and subscribe. Also, let me know in the comments any NFL players or teams that you'd like me to cover.